Hello, and welcome to our first ever webinar. We've been having some fun backstage because we couldn't work out how we could talk to each other as three presenters without starting the actual webinar. So Oli was panicking that I wasn't going to show up. And that I think is an insight into the fact that this is the first time we've ever done a webinar. So please excuse any further technical difficulties as we go through this. But very briefly, my name's Matt. I'm one of the co-founders of The Pioneers. And if you've never heard of us before, probably just worth explaining a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're a digital agency that works with scale-ups to help them build and create a people experience and a culture that they can be proud of. And we do that by helping them to build what we call a people operating system, or the people management processes and systems that you need to manage people at scale. So as we go through the session this afternoon, please drop in questions into the chat. We'd love to be able to respond to the topics that you're interested in. It's really lovely to see people. I think the first time you do one of these, it's always reassuring to find people who are interested in the things you're interested in, and for them to jump on. So thank you very much for your time. And today we're going to be talking about storytelling and storytelling in the context of recruitment. So how you can use storytelling to help you stand out from the crowd, and how you can use storytelling to connect on I think on quite a personal and an emotional level with what's meaningful and important to candidates. And to talk about that, we're joined by two fabulous guests. First, we have Tosin. Tosin's a senior tech recruiter at Delivery Hero. She's also the host of a fabulous podcast called Dear Candidate. And we've also got Oli. Oli is head of everything recruitment and employer brand at Honest Burgers. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Listen, I can hear you, so I hope other people can hear you. I think this is a good start. Tosin, maybe I could come to you first. Maybe the place to start is if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the Delivery Hero story for anyone who hasn't heard about you.
Absolutely, Matt. And thank you for the opportunity to be on this fabulous show. Right. So Delivery Hero as a company started in 2008. And that was when our current CEO, who's one of the co-founders, started an online food ordering service in Sweden. But officially, the company was born in 2011 as Delivery Hero. And basically, we're a global market leader when it comes to online food ordering and delivery. And more recently, we're pioneering, so we're pioneers of a new category in e-commerce, and it's called Q-commerce. Now, the super cool thing about Q-commerce is that you get your order in less than an hour. So that's as quick as 10 to 15 minutes. And basically, picture this. You're about to cook a delicious pot of soup, and 15 minutes into when you're about to start, you realize you've run out of salt. So that's kind of the problem we're trying to solve. So basically, don't panic, just order salt and you get it within 10 to 15 minutes. And that's really the Q-commerce story. So as a company, what drives us is the vision to deliver an amazing experience. So amazing food or grocery or whatever you order, amazing ordering, amazing delivery. So when you think amazing, what we want to come to your mind is Delivery Hero. Now, let me sort of wrap this all up by saying what started out as an ambitious idea in 2008 is today now operating in 4 continents of the world. So we operate out of APAC, LATAM, MENA, and of course, Europe. And we partner with more than 500,000 restaurant partners. We have globally over 27,000 employees, and we operate in more than 50 plus countries. So because I know a lot of scale-ups are listening, to this webinar, what I'm really saying in a nutshell is that idea can really go big, no matter how small you think it is. And I want you to remember Delivery Hero as a reference point. So remember our story. Today, this is what we look like. And not only do we have all of this amazing stuff, we're also listed on Frankfurt Stock Exchange, which means we're a publicly listed company. And then in 2020, we became a DAX company. So that's amazing. And yeah, that's our story. in a nutshell.
Fantastic.
Thank
Fantastic.
you.
And how do you help get that story out in your recruitment process?
Yeah, very good question, Matt. So the way I approach it is in a very dynamic way because candidates are different. They come with different experiences. They come from different places. And what I've realized is that candidates who kind of operate or know the brands that are currently operating where they're located tend to have a different narrative to people who live in regions where we're not present. So the
Yeah.
question basically is to find out what the candidate already knows about Delivery Hero as a company, and then to fill in the gaps, to sort of help them understand who we are, what we're all about, where we're going, and more importantly, what it means to work in an organization like Delivery Hero. And that's basically how that works.
Hey, that's great, and there's lots in there I think we'll pick up on over the course of the webinar. I'm particularly interested in the idea about trying to understand the story already in the mind of a candidate and then flexing the story you're telling to try and connect with that. Maybe before we jump into that, it's worth, Oli, maybe we could ask you to share a little bit about Honest Burgers for anyone who hasn't come across your story as an organization.
I'm not too sure I can follow Tosin's story.
Oh, please, no pressure.
Wow. So yeah, I work for a restaurant company called Honest Burgers. Tom and Phil are our co-founders. They met down in Brighton when they were at university. They were working at a fish restaurant at the time. And so yeah, Phil was, I think, a waiter, and Tom was a supervisor, or the other way around. And over a beer, they decided that they would spend part of their student loan on getting a grill and a fryer, and they started serving burgers and chips at festivals and parties. A little secret which I can tell you about is if you've been to Honest Burgers, we have rosemary salted chips. And then we have homemade lemonade as well. So actually at the time we were handing out homemade lemonade for free because that was all the lemon zest that we used to then use for the rosemary salt. And then the rest of the lemons went into the homemade lemonade. And that's still how we do it today. So a little fact for you there. But yeah, so then they decided that, they finished university, Tom went up to London, and they just got back in touch with each other and were like, come on, let's put this together. Let's make it serious. So a guy called Dorian at the time heard about this and invited Tom and Phil round to Dorian's house, and they cooked some burgers. So he helped them with a business plan, and they found a little place in Brixton Village Market, which, opposite next door to a fishmonger, opposite the fruit and veg stall. So kind of no thrills at all. 20 seats. They kitted it out, a proper DIY job, and but it just worked. They opened it. It went from 200 burgers to 2,000 burgers, and then they took that model, took it to Soho as a second restaurant. And we've now got 45 restaurants across the UK. It's our 10-year anniversary this year. We've got our own butchery, chipping room. So our core values are still there. And Tom and Phil are still there serving customers with our teams, with us and everything that we do. So that really kind of holds our culture tight and says a lot about the style of our business. Being local, simple, and quality food and good service.
Thanks, Oli. And Oli, I guess for people who are working outside of hospitality at the moment, I think it's probably an interesting time from a recruitment perspective. There's obviously been lots going on in the industry, lockdowns, Brexit, all that sort of thing. And I'm conscious that for the first time, we're seeing stories in the news about successful restaurant brands who are having to close restaurants or limit hours because they can't find enough people. So at this point in time, how are you using that story around Honest and who you are and what you stand for as a way of trying to stand out with candidates?
I think it's having that emotional connection with all of our candidates. Ultimately COVID has kind of ramped up what was coming anyway. So I think before COVID, we were putting a strategy in place to make sure we were attracting the right people. But I think by telling the right story and telling your unique selling points on who you are and focusing on what you want to share, you should attract the right people. I don't think it's all about trying to get thousands of applications. You much prefer fewer applications, and for those applications to be the right ones. So we've just focused on what makes us unique and try to make this emotional attachment with job seekers or people within hospitality, people coming into the industry, and that is kind of what makes us stand out.
Okay. And when you talk about the emotional connection, like what sort of emotions is that? Does that make like what? Because I think what's interesting about the Honest brand is, or at least my impression over the last 18 months, 2 years, is a confidence about who you are and who you're not, which I think maybe came through quite a lot in the service with the brand before, but maybe less so in the people experience. I don't know if that's true, but like I guess, what is it emotionally that you're trying to? What would you want candidates to feel about you?
I think it is, and I think you just got to be humble with who you are. You know, our employer brand is we have a little badge, Honest by Nature badge. It's like a little heart which you kind of put on everything. And Matt, you literally just said it there. That means it's who we are and who we're not, and where we want to get to. And if we're able to tell people that, then you do form an attachment. I think the power of storytelling is you can take someone into this different world and take them on the journey with you. But you've got to mix up your stories as well. Like, there's no point in saying the same thing every single time, and that every single story has got a happy ending, because it hasn't, right? And then that will form the attachment. Yeah.
Tosin, I'm just curious. I know you do a lot of work with candidates and with your podcast and that sort of thing. And I want the insight that gives you into what candidates really want, or what do they want to hear about, or what they. I think when people are looking for a new job or they're thinking about changing, there is this sort of craving for a new journey or a new adventure or something. I'm just intrigued your insight into how candidates see the process.
Yeah, there's the craving for sure, but there's also the silent fear because they don't know what to expect. So it's like, I want to know what's in the future without actually going into the future. And from my experience working with candidates, what I've seen is that candidates really appreciate it when companies are honest and transparent. You know, so you basically tell them what they should expect. And then another thing they want is for you to show them success stories. So when they come with all of these questions, what most of the time they're really getting at is, tell us you've done this before, and don't just show us a document. Don't just tell us in theory. Show us an example. Tell us a story. Tell us about somebody who went through this same process. I mean, that may not be possible all the time, but something similar, because we're looking for common ground anyway. And then let me, sort of relate to that and use that as a yardstick to decide if this is really what I want to do. Yeah, so that's a lot of what the candidates look for.
I really love, particularly your point about finding common ground. I think with some of the work that we do, one of the challenges with organizations is I think sometimes they feel uncomfortable about being honest and sharing bad news. And I think particularly in the context of recruitment, a lot of it's about timing. So I don't think you don't want the first thing a candidate hears about you to be bad news, right? That's just like, that's not the story to land at the start of that process or that funnel. But if you can get that sense of common ground with someone, I think that gives you the permission to share the honesty and to share share that openness and transparency. Because if you can connect with a candidate about why they might be interested in you, why they might be able to feel part of what you're trying to do, then I think people are genuinely interested in, well, what are the problems you're trying to solve? Whether that's from a technical perspective or a cultural perspective or whatever it might be. Actually, if you've got that common ground, the problems then become exciting challenges to be overcome. And I think people appreciate that transparency and honesty. But if you do it too early, you obviously put people off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, Tosin, I know we talked before about some of the things you do to give people that insight into the organization, like the open channels you have with people and that sort of thing. I just wonder if you share some of that, because to your point about connecting people with the people within your organization who can tell it as it is, and there isn't that perception of there being a filter on that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I even go into that, I think one approach that companies should try as much as possible to employ is to actually try to answer the questions before they are asked in form of storytelling. So in the team, in Delivery Hero, we have an employer branding team that is separate from the recruitment team, but still part of the talent acquisition team. Now, it even gets more granular because we have an employer branding team that is responsible for tech and product roles. And then we have another team that is responsible for non-tech roles. So now let's take the employer branding team for tech and product. Now, within this team, they've been able to come up with different ideas. And one of that is we have a YouTube channel for techies. So engineers within the company organize different internal tech talks, and then we put out all those tech talks, or some of them actually, on the YouTube channel. Now, an engineer who wants to work for the company and who's trying to imagine what it looks like to work for the organization can already, at the point of application, go over to the YouTube channel to look at some of the work that is being done, and then already get excited, hopefully, and apply. We also have a tech blog where you have engineers talking about different tech topics and also topics about their own growth. So, for example, topics related to them and how they were able to navigate certain issues in their own employee journey. And that's what I mean by already answering the question before it's asked. Because when candidates want to apply for a job, most of the time they do some research and then they see all the story points staring at them in the face, and then it already, begins to paint a picture of what to expect.
Yeah. And Oli, so quite a different context, but how do you give people that insight into like what a day in the life looks like within Honest?
So obviously you've got the initial interactions. So like if you look at our social channels, what we try to do is make it as transparent as possible. So we've done like restaurant takeovers where the team will literally manage the Instagram account for the day, and that will just give our customers a good insight to the team at that restaurant. And then the same kind of with our careers page and adverts as well. But then when it comes to the first human interaction, we have adopted more experience days. So we invite a group of candidates down, and we prefer just to show it. So we'll take them into the kitchen, we'll cook them some burgers, they can taste some of the food, they'll meet our founders, and the founders will tell the story of Honest and about our heritage. And there'll be someone from the prep kitchen there as well to talk about the food, and then from the farms to deliveries into the restaurants, and then our own team. So we do a lot of peer-to-peer learning, but we've also adopted peer-to-peer recruitment as well. So our restaurant managers will essentially recruit other restaurant managers. So which is great because it's them that's showing them exactly what the role is, and all about the good, the bad, and the ugly of working at Honest and the industry, right? So that really paints the picture all the way around.
And you both talked about that sort of peer-to-peer connection. I think from a social proof point of view, like people want to hear the story from people they can identify with. I think we talked about how you do that in a way that doesn't mean that you unwittingly, if you like, end up just recruiting in your own image. So how do you share stories from people within your organization that just don't appeal, that only appeal just to the real narrow people who go, oh, that's exactly like me. You know, like, so Tosin, you're smiling. Like, what's your perspective on that one?
Yeah, as you were talking, I remember this caption of someone hiring mini me's. So like
Yeah.
he looked at the recruitment team and the team, sorry, and everybody sort of looked like him, you know. So and yeah, I think that's something that companies have to be proactive about. Of course, you want to hire excellent people. That's the trend we should see, but we shouldn't see a trend of everybody laughing the same way, talking the same way. I mean, that's not relevant to the job. Right. So one of the ways we leverage storytelling in the recruitment process to ensure that we have a diverse team is basically even from the recruitment team. So the recruitment team itself is very diverse, and then we hire globally. So I know that's something that not every company might be able to do because of all of the government regulations, visa issues, and the rest of that. But for us as a global company, we're able to do that. So we bring in people from different parts of the world, and we're able to, bring them to Berlin to work in the company. And then another thing I can talk about is the fact that I remember being in a conference, an internal conference, a global one before COVID, where the co-founder was sharing the Delivery Hero story. And he said some things that really resonated with me. I mean, up till today, I still remember those things. One of them was that I want to build a company that my children will be proud of. And I was like, I mean, for me, that was very inspiring. And there were a lot of takeaways from that conversation. It was much more than something I read or listened to, because I was able to hear him tell that story. And then periodically, of course, and consistently within the company, we have this updates. We listen to him, share on different things that the company is trying to do. But where I'm going to with all of this is when people who work in your organization are inspired enough, they would be the ones to bring in people to your organization. And if you already have a diverse workforce, then you know what the result will be. And looking at the data, referred candidates are 40% more likely to convert than candidates from any other acquisition source. And that's really, what a lot of companies try to increase, and leveraging storytelling through your founders or co-founders would really help to drive this a lot. That's what I think.
I think one of the things that really stood out when you talked about creating something that your kids would be proud, that sort of core emotion, I think if you can get your founders or the people who are sharing your story to be able to add those little emotional details that really connect with like quite universal experiences, even if their story might be quite different, I think you can add little tangible details or little emotional hooks within that story that people identify with. I remember I used to use, and I don't use it anymore. There was a video of Obama doing his last ever campaign speech, I think, when he was running for re-election, and he was stood in, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest, and with a huge crowd. You know what it's like in a huge crowd, and he was talking about his experience of running first time round when he was basically an unknown senator, and by the end of it, everyone's obviously, rooting for Obama and what have you. But the way in which he dragged people into the story was really clever, because ostensibly no one in that crowd has run for president. They don't have. It's not a shared experience for any of them. But he shared this story about first time round when he went up to Iowa and nobody knew him, and he had to get up like at 3 a.m. and the coffee was awful, and he got out, and as he was getting into the car, it was tipping down with rain, and the rain ran down his neck, and then he sat in his car for ages, and he was like, why are we going here, what's going on? And then he gets to this little meeting, and basically got completely showed up by this local lady who completely owned the room, and he was sat there thinking, I'm trying to run for president, I can't even hold a meeting of 12 people, this lady's completely. Now what I loved about it is, no one's run for president that's listening to that, but those little details about getting up before you wanted to, staying in a terrible motel, drinking bad coffee, the rain down your neck, all of those things light up as reference points for people in that story. And I think when I see great stuff done in the recruitment space, often it's because people just give themselves a bit of license to tell a story and to give that color to it, rather than just like the factual, this is what we offer, this is what's going to happen, those sorts of things. Yeah, I don't know if that resonates with either of you.
Yeah, massively. I think like just to go on to that, like I think most of what goes into your brain is kind of filtered out, and you'll only store the bits that you know really caught you. And what you just said, Matt, really resonates with our founders and like how Tom and Phil set up. Like I think their second or their third festival, it was like rainy, it was windy. They had this marquee which they brought secondhand, and they'd put it in, and then that kind of blew away. And then they've obviously just got all this food as well. They just spent loads of money on food, and then no one turns up to this festival. So it was really kind of like how they go through the motions and the ups and the downs of getting Honest Burgers like starting. And people like to hear about that because they like to know the effort and what they went through to set it up. And it just gains so much more respect when people really join the business. So.
Yeah. Tosin, there's a question that's popped up in the chat about how you decided to use the medium of video. And I guess the interesting bit is how do you measure the interaction? And from a storytelling perspective, when you're using storytelling recruitment, how do you know what's working and what isn't?
That's using video content.
I believe so,
right?
Yeah.
I believe basically from the engagement, the level of engagement that you see, or sometimes people watch your content and they don't engage, maybe because they're shy or something, or you want to see how many people actually look at this, how many people, drop a reaction, if there are questions after that, if there are comments, and if there are references to it. And I'll give you an example. So I've been in interview situations with candidates, and the candidate says, oh, I actually watched this content on XXX. And then I know, okay, that's great. I mean, we're reaching someone. And then you sort of begin to measure all those data points to see if this is actually having an impact. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. I think I'm also conscious that John on our team's like really fascinated with this stuff at the minute. I think what we're going to see, or what we're starting to see from the tech perspective, is people basically looking for HubSpot functionality in the recruitment space. So how do you track interaction with content, and how do you make your candidate journey pivot depending on what people are interacting with, what people are watching, and that sort of thing. So I think it's, particularly as things get more competitive, that ability to curate a journey that responds to what people are interested in, I think is something we're seeing more of, and getting more interest in how you do that and how you take a much more evidence-based approach about which stories are really impactful with which of the personas that you're trying to target. You've both talked about the importance of the founder as a storyteller and their role within that space. I was thinking there's a really great blog called something like The Law of Startup Physics, which is about how scale-ups grow quicker than any individual can. But that the only person that's able to scale is the founder, and they can scale so long as they keep ownership of that story, and so long as they keep telling that story. And I guess I'd love to hear from both of you, really, one, how you use your founders in the recruitment context, but also how the way in which they've told their story might change. Tosin, you talked about incredible growth over, at the start. Like, I'm intrigued how the story that your founders is telling has evolved through that period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have all of the PR efforts, going into, talking about where we are, the achievements that we are recording, and what we, still want to do. But at the more granular level, just to back up to what I talked about before, the way it really ties into recruitment is how well we're able to empower the people already in the company with that story, and then allow them to be the storytellers. So even without telling them, they own the story, and they take it to people within their sphere of influence, and they're able to communicate to those people the way they would understand, and say, look, we're doing amazing stuff. I think this is what you would like to do. Apply to this position. It goes well with you. And then from there, we have people who apply. And like I was saying, based on the data, that a candidate who's referred has the potential to do percent better than candidates from any other acquisition channel.
Okay.
So yeah.
And Oli, presumably, for, referred candidates or indeed candidates that started as customers must be that their first point of contact must often be with people who are working in your restaurants, right?
Yeah, I mean, our preferred candidates would be our customers because they've already formed that relationship and the emotional relationship with Honest Burgers. Like, they've tasted our food, they've been to experience the atmosphere, so they are already on the journey. So they're already a better qualified candidate. But I guess you only see so much as a customer. You see great burger, tastes good, you got a friendly person who's just served it to you, the atmosphere is good, there's nice music playing. But what you don't see is like all the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes, like the cleaning and finishing work maybe at like midnight, or getting to work early to do the delivery and the stock take. So there's so much more to the job role. So I think in some ways it's great to have, and that is our preferred method, to have customers as our candidates. But also there's still quite a lot of work to do to really tell them the overall version of the role at Honest.
Yeah, and presumably you've got a bit of responsibility, like, to do a good enough job that even if you don't give them a job, you don't turn them off as customers, right? That's a
yeah, without a doubt. Like, if you meet someone for an interview and they don't get the job, they can still be a potential customer. But I firmly believe the more you talk about your people and the more storytelling you talk about your people, the more customers you'll get as well. So it's all linked.
And Oli, just to jump back to that point about your founders as storytellers, like, how have you mentioned Tom and Phil and Dorian previously, like how have you seen their role as storytellers and I guess, like, in a way, guardians of the Honest brand? How do you work with them in the recruitment context?
I mean, they have their own story, I think, from a personal journey they've been on together. But actually, how we use them is as characters within the story. So, and I think every story you are telling has to have the characters, and the characters kind of have to be the same. So that's, I guess, when we are telling our stories, we use Tom and Phil and Dorian as characters within our story. But I don't think the characters just have to be humans. It can also be the product that you're serving as well. So they are so important because they're the reason our culture is how it is. Like, they're founders of a business with over 45 restaurants, and they're still talking to customers. They're still running shifts. They're still either Tom or Phil will be at everyone's first day to do their introduction to Honest Burgers, and that's what's really important. So whilst they might not necessarily be there every stage of the interview process, they'll be there on someone's day one or someone's day two, and that plays such a strong part into the culture that we have at Honest. It doesn't matter, whatever level you get to, you can still muck in and you can still be on the floor with the front line, and that's what we're about.
Cool. I guess for people on the call, maybe some advice about where what you've learned from trying to incorporate storytelling into recruitment, maybe some of the things that worked really well, some of the things that went wrong, good places to start, dead ends, that sort of thing, the sort of, the wisdom of experience. Tosin, you're chuckling, so I'm going to come to you with that.
Candidate that I was interviewing, and he said to me on the call that, because I usually ask them this question to understand, what they expect from the company, and basically I can, tell them what is relevant to them based on our own story. And then he said to me that my goal is to become the CTO of the company. And I think he gave me a very ambitious timeline. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's time to manage your expectation. Of course, I'm not trying to kill your ambition, but this is the reality of what happens. So this is the way people, move from one position to the other. And if you're hired at this level, it would take this. And I mean, the timeline that you gave, I don't know about that. So that's kind of it. Like, it's important to, even though we tell stories, we need to be very authentic with what we tell, and we need to manage the expectations of the candidates to help them understand that this is, like Oli was saying, behind all the amazing stuff, there's the cleaning, there's the this, there's the that, and it's good to already have the complete picture of what you expect.
I think, Tosin, what's like when we get to talk to great recruiters, I think that's the one principle that I think sets people apart. I think great recruiters are always interested in the right hire. Like, is this obviously, is it good for Delivery Hero or Honest, but is it also good for the candidate?
Yeah.
Or are we just pulling someone in who's gonna become disillusioned very quickly, or for whom it's not a good choice?
Yeah.
And I think particularly when you, as you both now are, working in markets that are very, competitive and tight to find candidates, having that, I guess it must be like a personal value around like doing the right thing for a candidate and finding out what the right thing is for a candidate and trying to be helpful to a candidate rather than just selling someone on Delivery Hero.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a two-way street. So it's about us meeting your expectation and you meeting our expectation. So this must come together, which is why you shouldn't force candidates to take your offer. Because if you do that, you will lose more money. They would come in for 1, 2, 3 months, and then they're already gone because this is not what they expect. So it's important to have that conversation early on in the interview process.
That also builds your network, like, because there might not be a role for that person right there and then. Like, as an example, like we Dub, who well, Matt, you obviously know Dub very well, and I work very closely with him. I met Dub like 3 years before he actually joined Honest Burgers, because at the time it just wasn't the right role for him. I did actually offer him a position. I did offer him a position. I thought it was the right position, but obviously it wasn't. And he turned us down at first. And then we just stayed in contact. And then the right position came up, and he's been with Honest for like 2 years now. So it always helps, like, if you're just honest and transparent with the candidate, that it might not be the right role, but there might be the right person in the future.
And I think from a, like you say, from a reputation point of view, you can distinguish yourself by telling your story in a way that's different and inspiring and shows up really well. But I think you can also, I think the missed opportunity often is you can differentiate yourself if a candidate feels like their story's really been understood. If there's a moment in your recruitment process where someone's able to say, tell me about you, like, what are you, and have that very humble, empathetic conversation where someone actually feels like they get the opportunity to talk about their story and their hopes and their fears and their ambitions, and it's not laced with, am I being assessed at this point in time?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just intrigued if you've come across good stuff where you've seen recruitment processes that do a good way of getting people to share their personal story.
Okay.
You go.
Yeah,
you can start, Tosin.
Okay. Yeah, I think I like My Path to Google by Google. I think it's a very interesting one because you sort of hear different stories through the lips of different people. And then it's interesting to read how people, were able to, get into the process and end up working in this big tech company. And I think that's one storytelling initiative that is doing really well in the market.
I think Netflix do really, really well. And I think Netflix, their culture deck, I think there's enough there to attract someone to apply and just would love to work there. But there's also a lot there that would make someone run 1,000 miles away because it isn't
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it. They outline exactly who they are in every bit of detail. And if you're the right person, you will definitely apply. But if not, then you just won't.
I saw a great video that Netflix put together about their work on DE&I, and it just, I mean, they're in the business of storytelling, so it was inspiring and what have you. But it had if you wanted to see something, I think, that pitched the emotional range of something, you know, that ability to share challenge and share negative emotion without, in a way that keeps people interested in a story. It was really great. There's a question that's popped up in the chat about, I think both of you talked about the importance of, you know, peer-to-peer storytelling, getting your people to share the story, those sorts of things. One of the question is, how do you teach people to do that, or how do you help people to get better at sharing those stories? I don't know if that's something that, I mean, like, Oli, maybe I'll come to you. Like, do you have restaurateurs who are like naturally better storytellers than others? Does that sort of show up in the recruitment piece?
Yeah. So I think it's more kind of internal engagement, and on our comms platform, we use Workplace by Facebook. So you're able to share stories, pictures, videos, but it's kind of our central hub where we go for everything. So yeah, certainly we have more people who post on there about their team, about what they've achieved, if there's been promotions, than others. But as an example, we had one of our restaurants in West London. She had put together this experience day, and it was all for first timers, you know, people who hadn't worked before. And she never really posted on Workplace and was fairly quiet. But she posted like a couple of pictures. I was like, that was incredible. Like, you didn't tell anyone about it and I think she had done it like about two weeks before. And I was like, you need to do more of that. So yeah, what we do is I will kind of point them sometimes in the right direction. If they ask me a question, I'll say, if you wouldn't mind, can you just put that on Workplace? Just make sure you're telling the others about it. As well as, like, you know, podcasts or, you know, TED Talks as well. We try to encourage people to share what they're learning into a wider group rather than just individual.
And I think, Oli, one of the things I think I've experienced is with the storytelling piece, depending on the type of organization you've grown up in or that you've seen, like, I think people turn up at work sometimes with a sort of blinkered view about how you ought to communicate or what's appropriate. And a lot of what makes a good story, like the emotional element, the human element, the sort of theater of good story, if you like, tends to sit outside of that. So if people see examples of that showing up in the workplace, I think it gives people confidence to bring a little bit more of themselves into the conversation. Maybe I'll pull out another question. Debbie's asked, what if different parts of the organization don't agree on what the story is? And it can be hard to get. Now, Oli and I are going to laugh because we've got a little bit of shared experience around this one. In terms of, Oli, is it all right to share maybe where some of the storytelling work within Honest started?
Yeah, go for it.
So just at the start of lockdown, the lead team at Honest came to us and said, we'd like to use the time productively while we've got the restaurants closed and we're not really sure, we can't sell any burgers at the moment. So we spent sort of 4 to 6 weeks with the exec team talking about the journey they want to go on and the narrative and the different components of that story. Well, honestly, Oli knows the characters obviously better than I do, but Honest lead team is not an organisation that's shy of bringing challenge to each other. But out of that process, we were able to produce a narrative that everyone felt comfortable and consolidated with. And I guess, Oli, I'm intrigued. Has that helped in terms of the storytelling you're doing in the recruitment space?
Yes, I think
it's a loaded question. You can't say my word. Yeah,
it's such a loaded question, isn't it? Yeah, like, I guess when you're storytelling, it's not a good enough story if you're trying to please everyone, and that's how I guess, you know, we've done a lot of our work is we don't want to please everyone. We want to please the people who will want to read it or want to hear it or want to come and work for us. Like, as a example, we redid our contracts and our handbooks. I think maybe like 9 months ago, and yeah, there was like some quite heated conversations externally about our contracts and our handbooks. And we basically just said they didn't read like us, they didn't sound like us, or they didn't feel like us, so we redesigned them. And then we didn't say about the content within the contracts. So we got some great press, we got some really bad press, but ultimately we had a load of applications from people who just wanted to join us because they loved the fact that we just wanted to break the norm and rock a few shake a few feathers, so say the least. But yeah, that was driven from our directors. Like, they kind of give you the full reign or the free reign to say go and do it, and some people won't like it, but it's fine.
There is anonymous has asked, do you have any specific tips for recruiting interns? So maybe we'd broaden that, like interns, or maybe people earlier on in their careers. Like, how do you tell a story to people who are perhaps are either turning up with a preconception about what life's going to be like at your organization, or have got less experience of what it might be like? How do you respond to that? Tosin, maybe come to you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'll say start from knowing their own story, and then from there, design, or because of course you're not fabricating anything, but share what is relevant to their own experience. So you want to know what motivates this intern, or why they decided to apply to your role, what they want to get out of it, like what's in the end game for them. Some will say, oh, I just want to learn and move on to something else. I'm just testing out. I want to work for your organization and all of that. So it's important to understand the story behind the candidate. And then you share about your company. So you let them know what is possible in the organization, what they will need. Some candidates will need to different things. Like, some will need to put in more effort, some will need to innovate. They're different things. It's not a one size fits all, kind of thing. But to sort of wrap up, I would say start from understanding the story of the candidate and where they want to go, and then you can share your own story as it relates to what would intersect with what they've shared.
I think that's such a great point. I think the more you understand about the candidate's story, the simpler you can keep it, because you're able to say that, of our narrative, this isn't relevant. It's just, we just need to connect on these, 1 or 2 points, rather than trying to tell the whole story all the time. I think that's what it distinguishes organizations that do it well, is the ability to, at a particular touch point, to show up with some simplicity, like just to have the discipline just to make one point, or to make, to speak directly to what's interesting to people. Oli, maybe I'll bounce the same question across to you. Like, when I presume, your employee base is relatively young, like what challenges or opportunities does that give you when you're trying to attract people into the organization?
Yeah, I guess at the moment our strategy is to look at more part-time workers, which has actually obviously driven a lot more Gen Z coming to the workforce. So I think it widens the balance, but ultimately they're people who may have not ever worked before. So I think it gives you an opportunity to mold and to develop how mold and to develop them into our culture and into our standards and into our service style, where it can also be quite harder for them because they haven't really experienced life working before. So I think there is a bit of a fine balance. Having said that, we have other workforce who have been in hospitality for years, and they come with such a big level of expectation as well. So I think we're just trying to manage everyone and every kind of skill level, but really, it's kind of where we're at.
I remember one of the stories that I came across within your business, speaking to someone who was he was a med student, and I can't remember if he was I think he was a med student in Birmingham, but he lived and worked in Honest and Brighton. And then, anyway, but he the way he framed it with me was he was learning all his, medical training from university, but he was working part-time at Honest, and he said, and that's where I've learned all my stuff about how you manage people.
Wow.
And
Look
I
at
think
that.
it's when you get stories like that which reframe the value proposition, if you like, so it fits with, now you might not be a med student, but you go, I'm actually going to get something of value from a 2-year tour of duty with Honest, or whatever it might be, that's actually fits into my story, rather than just turning up at Honest, doing the shifts, taking the money, and so on. So I think it's fine, like as you've both said, it's the extent to which you can find those great stories in your organization and sort of harvest them and utilize them.
Yeah. Also, Matt, if I may add, you can also use this as a feedback touch point. So you get to understand what candidates in this particular category are looking for, and then you prepare your organization to provide for that. And then it helps you grow, so you become, relevant over time.
Yeah. Look, I think we might be heading towards wrapping up, which on the one hand is making me try and recall all my instructions for how to wrap this up successfully. But before I muddle my way through that, I was just wondering if either of you had any sort of final thoughts or tips that you'd like to share with people.
I guess for me, it would be always look for different opportunities to tell stories and through your people. And they'll always change and they'll evolve as your business changes as well. Like, the culture will change as the business grows. So your story will as well. So I say always evolve and always look for different opportunities.
Thanks, Oli.
And to add to that, I'll just say two things. First, I'll say think about the reason why people like to watch a good movie, why they would invest the time and prepare to actually even go to the cinema. In some cases, it's because people like to see common points when they watch stories. They like to see themselves in other people, and that's why storytelling is super important. And the second thing is to also tell your story. Tell your story. Like, there's no achievement that is insignificant. Put it out there. You never know. Tell your story.
Yeah, thank you, Tosin. Your comment about the cinema. There's a really nice book by a guy whose name, I think it's John Gottall or something like that, called The Storytelling Animal. And one of the things he did was he was monitoring people's brain activity when they were watching films, and what he found was you get the same hormonal responses, the same sort of brain activity within people watching films as you would expect of the protagonist of the film. So, and he talks about storytelling as like flight simulators for the mind. So we can listen to stories, we can engage with stories, and it allows us to explore like the world without leaving the cinema seat, so to speak. And I think in recruitment, I think a lot of the storytelling is a bit like that. It's like giving someone a flight simulator so they can have a go around your company, and can they see themselves as a protagonist in that story or not? And the more of that you throw out, the more hooks you throw out on that, the more likely it is, I think, people are going to find that common ground that you've both talked about through the course of the afternoon as being like the starting point for really connecting with people and pulling them into your organization.
Yeah.
So look, thank you both so much for giving up your time and sharing some of your experience around this. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone else who's participated in the chat. And if there are questions and things we've missed, as I've tried to keep an eye on what's going on in there, we'll follow up and try and share things that people are interested in and what have you. I ought to say, if anyone's had, there are questions on this, or people are interested in some of the things we've talked about, please get in touch, because this is the sort of thing we like doing. In particular, if you're interested in how you can create that company narrative, how you can get an organization aligned around it, and then how you can translate that narrative into a candidate experience, how you can automate that, how you can personalize that's the sort of thing we do, and would love to talk to you about it. So you can get in touch with us in any of the ways that people usually get in touch with people, but there's our website and an email address and the Twitter account and all those sorts of things. But thank you so much for your time. I hope we've got through it without technical interruption. Otherwise, Tosin and Oli, I've really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Yeah.
And no one else has heard this, but I really appreciate it. This is the first in a series of webinars where we're looking around different topics in recruitment. So the next one's in about a month's time. So everyone's welcome, obviously, to come back and join us for that. But yeah, just one final thank you, Tosin, Oli. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.